Hello and welcome. Today we're talking about the Southern Tactical vz-61 Scorpion receiver. Now this is a receiver for the readily available 32 ACP vz-61 parts kits that are out there. And this enables you to build a semi-auto pistol that has a serial number, so YouTube, you know, it's super safe and it's definitely not one of the scary ones. But in this video, I want to talk about the receiver that I received, how it came together, you know, as a whole, and how it went at the range, as well as the differences between the Southern Tactical version and the Czechpoint receivers, because those are basically the only two commercially available metal options that you have if you want to embark on the project, and there are definitely some differences between the two. So we'll get into that. So starting with the receiver that I received, I bought this from Centerfire Systems because that was where I could get it the cheapest. And it was not labeled a blim, but it probably should have been. There's definitely some marks. I genuinely believe that these receivers were just in a box, sort of shaking around, because that's exactly what it looks like, and that it looks like they were dinging into each other. Beyond that, the only other issue I had, other than some slight like machine marks on the inside, the only actual issue I had was the thread on the bottom of the receiver where the grip screw goes into was not fully done, and that I had to chase it in order to get the grip screw to engage with those threads. So that sucked and was a little unfortunate, but otherwise it came together pretty easily. It's about, I don't know, 10-15% more difficult than just building an AR. The only thing that requires actual gunsmithing is the trigger guard rivet. And some people just don't even bother doing that, but you do actually have to smash that rivet and so that it will secure the trigger guard in place. I sort of bojangled it into place and got it smashed enough that it's secure. Not the prettiest, but it did work and it wasn't that difficult. The only other note I'll make about assembling this thing was that the order of operations is really important, and that there are multiple different things that sort of hold each other in, and you got to get them in place in the right orientation so that, you know, one detent can hold the magazine release, the bolt catch, and the ejector in place. Like, it's one detent, and so getting all three of those in place and in the right order is really important. Similar story with the fire control components. They're sort of interlocked in, as per usual, Czech over-engineering. Sort of went nuts, and you kind of need to know what you're doing with it. Just look that up, do some research. I can't show you exactly how that works on here, but there's definitely some good resources out there that you can find. Beyond that, once I actually got it together, it actually works really good. It's super fun to shoot. You know, 32 ACP is, many would consider it anemic, and it is very small, but it's very comfortable, and it was a lot of fun to shoot at the range. Honestly, it's a blast, and I do intend to SBR this thing, even though the stock is basically a wire coat hanger. But, you know, you kind of just need that done. The only thing that gave me any issues once I got it together was the magazine well itself. Was just the coating that was on it. The tolerances were really tight, and magazines didn't want to seat super smoothly. But I basically just, you know, I always have something around and that I'm fiddling with, so I just did this a whole bunch, and now it works great, and now there's no issue removing or inserting. So that was a problem that worked itself out just with a little bit of use. Let's see, beyond that, there were some weird things with the receivers themselves that I did not run into that I know some other people did, just like out of spec things and parts not going together. They had a bit of a rough launch. It seems to be a lot better now, but it is something that you should be aware of if you are going to embark on a project like this. Southern Tactical also sold entire pistols, and I did see they did a safety recall, and it's because they used the original fire control group. And so because the original had, we'll say, multiple positions, it is actually possible to over rotate past the safe position. And when you do that, then you can actually pull the trigger, even though its fire is normally way back here. So because of that, they did recall them, and I don't know, they probably welded a stop on there or something. But if you want to do that, you can. Otherwise, you can just basically stick with the safety detent and fire, safe, and just be done with it. I'm not gonna bother with it. I guess the recall actually didn't affect the receivers that they sold, because those were whole receivers, and I guess I'm supposed to do something with that myself. Just an interesting point to note that if you over rotate the safety and you have a round in the chamber, it is possible to accidentally send one when you don't mean to. So something to be aware of. That actually brings us nicely to the differences between the Southern Tactical and the Czechpoint receiver, because the Czechpoint actually uses a polymer safety as opposed to the original metal one that the Southern Tactical uses, and it's actually larger in diameter, so you can't even use a metal safety, and you can't use the polymer safety on this receiver. And because of that, they don't have the same like over rotation possibility, but that's just one of the differences. Another difference is markings. The original Southern Tactical actually had a logo on one side as well as manufacturer marks on the other, but they listened to feedback, did away with the logo, and now only have the bare minimum of markings and on one side, whereas Czechpoint still has import mark, the original manufacturer marks, logo, patent numbers, just kind of everything they can. And while it absolutely doesn't affect functionality, I think that it is aesthetically unappealing personally. But beyond that, the threaded screws in the back of the receiver, on the Czechpoint guns, it's a metric pattern. and I'll put it here because I don't know it offhand. And on the Southern Tactical, it is an inch pattern, which I'll put here again because I don't know it offhand. It's just kind of annoying if you're like actually going to SBR this and buy the little stock adapter, then you have to get the one with the right screws or then go buy the screws yourself. But there is a difference in if you buy the stock adapter from Czechpoint, it won't naturally just screw on here. I think it'll fit probably, but the screws it comes with, it's a totally different pattern. But that's another one of those small differences. Speaking of which, I'm going to do a mild tangent about that because Czechpoint is like 2 or 3 degrees removed from being an SBR, and Southern Tactical kind of just like copied their homework as far as the threaded screws in the back, which is fine if you want to put like a Picatinny rail back there. But the original receiver itself with the dovetail cut in it, I think there's no reason they couldn't include that dovetail and then just like not include the stock, because AR pistols, AK pistols, like there's tons of pistols that just, that especially if they're made in the US, you just like don't include the stock on it. It's just kind of annoying, and it makes no sense because even like the vz-61 Scorpion, the rear of this thing is also cut for a dovetail that the stock slides onto, and they are imported into the country with that provision there. And that may just be the ATF being whatever, weird, and then Southern Tactical just persisted that forward. But you know, there's a dovetail on this guy, and this comes into the country as a pistol, and it's fine. But for some reason, when it comes to the 60-year-old design, we got to go with the extra special screws instead of actually just cutting the dovetail in it. I sincerely think the original like Czechpoint version was just because of import reasons. And then Southern Tactical erred on the side of caution when I think they should just do the dovetail and be done with it. Beyond that, back to the differences between them. The Southern Tactical does not have the center support pin that the Czechpoint does. It's just a pin that goes like through the middle of the receiver. That's just one of the small details that if you're putting this together, you're going to have an extra part in your parts kit that you don't end up needing with this receiver. And finally, Czechpoint offers a threaded factory version of their pistol, which in order for there to be enough room on the barrel for a shoulder, the barrel has to be thicker, which means that the trunnion also has to be thicker, which is part of the reason it's kind of difficult to buy just a regular 1/2x28 threaded barrel and just drop it into a surplus upper. You can do it, but then you won't have a shoulder, which means you need to face mount whatever you put on it. If you want a shoulder, Czechpoint offers that, but it means that the trunnion is different than the like original surplus trunnions, and the barrel's thicker. And because of those two things, they're definitely fundamentally different than the original surplus ones. So it's one of those things to be aware of and one of those things to know, and definitely a difference. That's pretty close to about it. It is a pretty sweet little pistol. I really like that it's super fun, it's super accessible. It will bite you if you like hold it, you know, high and tight the way you're sort of used to doing, because this charging handle does indeed reciprocate, and it will bite you. There were no reliability issues for me, and it just looks really cool. As seen in James Bond and GoldenEye, you know, it was the original Klob, you know, all that stuff. And it's just a classic retro Cold War PDW, and I think it's a pretty cool little project, and I enjoyed it a lot, and I look forward to furthering it along, because I do have a second parts kit that I am going to put together into a different upper probably at least, and then I intend to SBR this. We'll continue to have some fun with this thing, but in the meantime, overall, I'm pretty happy with what I ended up with. There are some things that I would change, some small little things, like the actual dovetail on the back would be super great. But in the meantime, hopefully this provided a little bit more information, a little bit of detail, and a little bit of insight into this little receiver. But if you want to embark on a project like this, I encourage you, go for it. And if you have embarked on this type of project and you've run into different issues than me, I'd love to hear about it. You know, it's only through sharing within the community that we can all learn and understand and to be more aware of what's going on in the space. All in all, thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time.